This is the Energy Matters podcast. I'm Dan Kamen here with
Claire Broido-Johnson.
And today we will be introducing the series and ourselves before we get into all things energy all around the world. So what we're doing here is to talk about energy matters, both big and small, dirty and clean, just and unjust, helpful to the planet, not helpful to the planet. And we are hoping that what will come out of this podcast series is a series of things that Claire and I really want to talk to you about, from energy efficiency to President Trump's H.R. 1, the big blanking bill, to nuclear power, to all manner of things. But also we want to use our website and our email addresses to get audience interaction, topics you want us to do more on, do less on, things that you agree and disagree, and really build this as a forum to talk about how much energy matters. We all hopefully know it does, but the question for us and for you is, how does it matter in specific to all manner of topics?
All right. So we know there's a bunch of podcasts out there right now. There's Latitude Media. I'm a huge fan of Emily Kirsch's What It Takes. John Powers has a Clean Capital podcast. There's Suncast Media. We're different, or at least the way that we're trying to be different is we're talking very specifically about the science and business of energy, about climate, investment, startups in climate tech. There's none that are really focused on just the facts behind science and business. And Dan and I go way back. So Dan, when was it that we first met?
So I'd have to do the math on this one. It's definitely when dinosaurs roamed the earth, when fossil fuels were still being created. But I think that we got connected in roughly 1998 or so.
No.
Oh, see? Wrong
Mix,
day one.
1992.
Oh, my goodness.
You were a mere postdoc, and I had just finished my freshman year of college. And do you remember the name of the model that we worked on? Bill Nordhaus's Dynamic Integrated Climate Economy Model.
Right. The DICE model that has gone on to win for Bill the Nobel Prize in Economics. And we'll talk about Nobel Prizes at later on point. But yes, we not only worked on that model, but we also worked on some risk assessment, and you were amazing in helping me launch my far-flung projects in Kenya that you can't do without someone on the U.S. side, because back then there was no cell phones.
Right. Can you believe? Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what you were doing in Kenya all the way back in 1991, 92.
And just so you know, I'm going to ask you the same thing. What were you doing back then as a freshman and sophomore at Harvard? But we'll get to that. So what I was trying to do way back then was to take my physics background, my hopefully reasonable skills in computing and building things. I had wanted to be an astronaut earlier on in life, and still do actually, and apply that to better, cleaner, safer, more sustainable cooking practices. And I guess things don't change that much, because just earlier today, with one of my students, we just published yet another paper on clean and dirty cooking in Africa. So all these decades later, don't change much.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
Now, I got to ask you the same question. You, I know, came to Harvard thinking you'd be a physics major.
Yep.
So tell me what you were thinking as this amazing brain in the suburbs of Chicago, and then what changed for you when you got to Harvard.
I failed physics real bad.
Well, let's qualify that. No one fails at Harvard. A gentlewoman's C is as low as you can get, but do tell.
I grew up 30 miles west of Chicago in the cornfields, and I did my science fair experiments in grade school on acid rain and its effects on water environment. And I knew I wanted to do something with energy, but I thought physics was really cool at the time.
Well, physics is still cool, by the way.
Physics is still cool. It's really hard. I think I had a 20% at one point in my freshman year in my physics class. So realized that wasn't going to be my future. And you know, energy and environment was something that was always really interesting to me, and got to thinking through how do you create a new major at Harvard.
Well, I already got to say right there. So Claire saying, oh, she got a 20% and that convinced her not to be a physics major. And what that means is something we'll also come back to, and that is gender in the sciences and gender in STEM and gender in energy, because I distinctly remember as an undergraduate at Cornell in physics that the top student several classes in a row got under 20%, and that was an A+. And in other fields, they thought this was crazy. So physics does have its own language. And we'll come back to some of these connections to Robert Oppenheimer, to all kinds of stuff. But the physics culture is not about getting 100%. It's about being beat into the profession. So you might have actually been a physics major if you just read past the hype.
I don't know. I will say Janet Conrad, a big shout out to Janet Conrad, who's a professor now. She was my mentor at Fermilab when I worked there. And having a female mentor in the sciences is really why I am where I am today. And I'm looking forward to talking more about mentors in the energy and science space and climate space.
Yeah. And those of you who hang with us, we have episodes. Our third episode is going to be all about startup culture and mentors matter. And one of the other podcasts that Claire just mentioned, run by Emily Kirsch, who is sort of a source of renewable energy all by herself. She has not only mentored many women in the energy field, but she set up funds designed specifically to fund women in this field. So there are some really cool things that we will be coming back to again and again. Certainly climate change, smart energy systems. What is the smart grid? What's the dumb grid? What are the opportunities to think about energy just by itself, but also in a much more holistic way? Fission, fusion, the fossil fuels that we have already burned, those that we're going to burn, those that we don't need to burn. All of these things are topics that we hope you, the audience, will be really interested in and will pull us back to as you feel like, oh, there's more I want to hear about this or that.
Yeah. So why are we doing this now? I think we're both really impatient.
I know we're both really impatient.
And we both spent our careers working on and trying to create solutions for climate change, right?
I think that's definitely one of the drivers. I think the other driver is that after being friends and colleagues and things for decades, we're now living 30 miles apart.
I know.
So it's much easier to get together.
So exciting. Yeah. So Dan, you just left Berkeley and came to the Baltimore, D.C. area. We also are going to have a podcast about the difference between East and West in energy in the United States. So tell us, what caused you to move out here?
Well, so to do that, I got to go all the way back to the other side. And that as I was a junior faculty studying energy at Princeton, and that was right after I met and worked with Claire. And I moved out to California because so many interesting things were going on. And back in the late 80s and early 90s, it felt like most of the challenges that we knew to even put words to were technical. Are solar cells cheap enough? Can we make wind turbines that work? Lots of things where at least my physics background felt like it was the right starting point. Now we are here 25, really 30 years later, and there is so much that we need to do better on the science engineering side. But I would say one of the taglines for me in this podcast series is going to be our bigger challenges are now on the policy, the economics, the understanding side. And so we are shifting into a world where if you're not super interdisciplinary,
right,
you're going to really have a hard time getting somewhere. And old dogs like me who come out of the physics tradition, which comes out of the Manhattan Project tradition, are just not well equipped. And so I met this spunky college sophomore, and she taught me a lot about you got to think differently, and things that I thought were like, words of the enemy, like business case and what is a pitch and this kind of thing. I knew none of these things, and you as a sophomore knew all that stuff.
Well, different. Yeah. And I think one of the things, just to put it out on the table is you've been a fantastic mentor to me, but I don't think I've ever taken any piece of advice that you've ever given me.
So you're just like my kids. And I say there's no advice that ever offered. And I always say that my students, if they do what I say, they're not doing what they ultimately want to do. So you're in a fine tradition of ignoring me, and I'm definitely used to it.
So I don't think we have particularly big egos, and we don't need to be right. But we do want to be creating a podcast where facts are respected. Yeah. And so that's part of what we're trying to do here is we there's podcasts everywhere. There's lots of people that are talking about climate change right now. There's lots of talk about policy, but it's really hard to find a scientist like you who is also super involved with climate change and a business person like me and have us be able to talk about really anything, dicey issues, not dicey issues. And I think that's what we're trying to do here is really bring up some of the big issues of the day. Energy efficiency, what's happening with grid transmission, what are we going to do with solar power, what are we doing with battery storage, why is it so hard to get things passed in the DC administration? Maybe we know the answer to that, but what are our passions and interests, and how can we work together to solve problems and interact with the people that are going to be hopefully listening to this podcast to try to build solutions together.
And certainly one of the things we'll want to do is to make sure that we give everybody multiple ways to interact with us, to correct us, to say you need to slow down, you need to do more, you need to do less. But you said something really critical there, Claire, and that is you said that we have our own opinions, we have our ways of doing things, but we really do want to make this a fact-based place. And so, if someone in the administration says, well, sea level rise is happening because rocks are falling into the ocean, we are not going to dwell on that for a long time. But the other side of it is that one of the heroes in this field, Amory Lovins, founder of the Rocky Mountain Institute, is really fond of saying something that I think is right on the money. And he likes to say, in God we trust, everyone else bring facts. And I hope that we will at least start with the facts, and we'll give different interpretations. We'll look at where are the perspectives of where you come from, or as they say, where you stand is based on where you sit. But we will try to start with those and then try to understand for ourselves, because I don't think it's clear, no matter how many years you've been in the field, that people can look at the facts in the energy field and come up with dramatically different conclusions in terms of what we should do, shouldn't do, policy-wise. And we're going to try to really unpack a lot of that episode by episode.
Exciting. I'm ready for it.
But I do also want to highlight that there are some parts of kind of the energy climate landscape where the facts, the policies might not be agreed on by everybody, but the basics are clear. And there's other things which it's not clear. I think that if you ask 10 experts, how do you make the grid smart, you'll get 13 answers.
At least.
And if you say, how do we think about big centralized power plants versus distributed energy, mini grids, microgrids, metro grids, you'll also get like 13 answers for 10 experts. And so we do want to highlight some of the big issues in front of us. Just what will the president's H.R. 1, the big blanking bill, do to the energy field? Others, should you be investing more or less in nuclear fission, fusion, small modular reactors? What do experts outside of just us think about carbon capture and various technologies? And we are going to start much of the first season with Claire and I getting to know you, the audience, in terms of your interactions. But then we're going to increasingly bring in guests. So we have three-way conversations about these topics. And you who stick with us, and we hope you all do and you tell your friends, will get to hear a wider and wider set of questions and topics about what are the challenges, what are the things being discussed to deal with them in the energy field.
So I want to go back to what drew you from Berkeley back to Hopkins.
Well, I mean, the easy answer is you played a big part in that because you started to alert a lot of folks at Johns Hopkins University that, maybe someone in California was movable here at the time when Hopkins is trying to launch something that I'm now central to, which is something called ROSI, the Ralph O'Connor Sustainable Energy Institute. But what really drew me back in a broader sense was the commitment of Mike Bloomberg himself, the effort at Johns Hopkins to engage in a very interdisciplinary way in energy issues, and the thing I said before, and that is when I was new in the field and felt like the biggest challenges facing us in the energy world were innovations in solar cells, in batteries, in geothermal power, in tidal and wave power, that we needed to make some significant advances on the energy technology side, the energy science side. We still need them, but now increasingly it's about how to advance the community, not just individual projects. And I think for that, being near Washington, D.C., no matter what the politics are, is a critical part of that story, because we know how to make some individual innovations. But what it's clear is that we're moving way too slow, at least from my perspective, on decarbonizing, greening the entire economy, and bringing energy to the roughly 800 million people worldwide, many of whom are rural women who don't have access to electricity worldwide. And that's really where my own work focused in East Africa and Southeast Asia, in China, and at the grid level all around the world. This is a wonderful vantage point to try to make a difference. But really, Claire, you started the process.
You're giving me too
much
credit.
East. No, I don't think so.
So I've been in Baltimore since 2002. I came to Constellation after business school and after working at Enron. And
we'll come back to this Enron thing in a second, folks. So
yeah, I don't know. But and then founded SunEdison here with Jigar Shah. And I've been in Baltimore ever since. And Baltimore is a fantastic city. And I'm just glad you're in D.C. now. So I'm glad we can have these conversations.
Well, it's fun. And so one of the things that you highlighted, and we do have an episode on this later in season 1, and that's about the differences in energy policy between East and West. And by East and West, we mean, to extent, the U.S., what's going on on the eastern seaboard with the so-called RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Coalition in the Northeast, the PJM, the Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland area where we're in here, compared to a dramatically different picture in California. And actually, the governor of California, who maybe or maybe not is running for president, it's hard to tell. But there's such a different perspective. And after 25 years of the California energy climate scene, the East Coast takes some getting used to put it mildly.
Yeah. We're too fast. We're too slow. We're too what?
Well, I mean, I'm still learning. I've only been 3 weeks on the job here, so maybe a little early. But from my perspective, in California, you cannot start a conversation about an energy innovation without also thinking, I'd like to think deeply, but at least thinking about the climate impacts and also the diversity, equity, inclusion, the DEI, the justice, the inclusive transition aspects, even at a time when the federal government is trying to shut those programs down. And for us in California, our climate laws, our energy laws, the advocacy groups are completely on the ball when it comes to how will this or that energy decision affect marginalized communities, women, fence-line communities, people of color, both in California and beyond. And that language is pretty lacking here from my perspective as a Californian.
Here. Very lacking here. Yep. But I do think, for 25, 30 years that I've been in this conversation, everyone has always flocked to Silicon Valley, right? If you want to get anything done, all the money is on Sand Hill Road. You got to go to Sand Hill Road and you got to pitch, and your CEO has to be based there. And even if you raise your first round of funding from, in Baltimore by your Series B, they're going to want to move your company to Silicon Valley. I'm not seeing that as much anymore. I'm really not. I think you can start, of course, post-COVID, you can start a company from anywhere, right? But the investors are now in New York right now. They're in Boston right now. They're not all in Northern California anymore. And that's lovely. That makes it a little bit easier. My entire career, I've told everybody who's asked for advice that if you're, just starting your career, you should go to Silicon Valley. And I don't think that's necessarily true anymore.
I think this is something we're going to want to come back to a bunch of ways in the episodes we do on startups and energy innovation. But even the broader picture, the Silicon Valley energy community was young and small when I got there in the late 90s. Now it is almost co-equal with the kind of the IT and the fintech, the financial technology worlds that are huge. And so that's changed in California, but almost every place that I go and work, so Morocco and Kenya and China, they are all sending representatives to learn how to translate or to take the pieces of the Silicon Valley culture back to their own areas. And so Silicon Savannah is the term they use in Kenya. Silicon Sand is the term they use in Morocco. Silicon Amazon, which I'm not really sure flows off the tongue, is the term that I was told to talk about at a panel we're looking to put together at COP30. And I hate to use acronyms, but COP is the Conference of the Parties. The 21st COP was in Paris, where something did get done. COP 15 in Copenhagen, where nothing got done. COP 30 in Brazil, in Belém, is going to be officially the last COP that the U.S. will participate in, at least under this administration. And we pulled out of the Conference of the Parties, the climate negotiations once before. It caused me to resign my federal job at the time over my anger and disgust to what the U.S. was doing. And this meeting in December in the Amazon, hopefully to be dominated by indigenous voices as well as government bureaucrats, is a place where this Silicon Amazon is going to come up again and again. So what are the lessons from Silicon Valley for startups is, I think, one of the interesting features. But you're right. It has diffused and diversified, and the California innovation ecosystem is pretty full, but many others are not. And so finding how to leverage, what does New York do? What does Paris do? What does Beijing do? What does Cape Town do? What does Jakarta do? Those are really interesting aspects of this broader picture, because no matter what your politics are, it is clear that we are way too slow for the planet in terms of greening our energy system. Politics, economics, we'll talk about it, but the planet is telling us very clearly, the human infestation, is not doing us any favors right now.
You don't think 104 degrees in D.C. right now is pleasant?
Or just a little while ago when it was hotter in Siberia than it was in Florida. And obviously we've seen these massive fires. And so, no, I do not think 104 in D.C. works, nor do I think 95 in the Siberian Arctic works.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty scary out there. So, and many of you have stories about how dramatically different the weather is. And of course, humans have, at minimum, created a fifth season, right? We used to have winter, summer, spring, and fall. But now we certainly around the planet have winter, summer, spring, fall, and fire season at the minimum. And I would say there's now flooding seasons, hurricane seasons. We haven't even talked about crop failure seasons. So the energy matters theme of this podcast is going to extend in a lot of different directions. So I got to ask you one more kind of launching question here, Claire. You mentioned how great a place Baltimore is.
Yeah.
So one of the things that struck me right off that kind of fits into this theme and warms my Californian heart is that there are pretty interesting group of women energy leaders that you and others have helped to cultivate. So just say a little bit about that, because it's one of the themes that I want to make sure is central to what we do in this series, not kind of an afterthought, not a small bit. I'm really hoping that diversity in the energy climate world is something that we talk about a lot in substantive ways in this series.
Yep. I'm so glad you asked that question. So when I started my career in the mid-late 90s, I was the only woman in the room, always. And, even in Sun Edison, which is a company I co-founded, there were lots of deals done in, clandestine places with clandestine people.
Meaning men's locker rooms is what you mean.
Yeah. And, I have spent a huge part of my career supporting women in the energy and climate space and trying to support them, and would love to hear from any of them, whether it's helping them with editing their resumes, giving them introductions, helping them decide how to pitch themselves, figuring out how to, ask for a raise, all of those things. And I still do that. I probably 20 people a month I talk to about one or many of those things. And there is a group of women, particularly younger than I am, who are they're starting their own companies. They're supporting each other. They are listening. They are trustworthy. They are trusting each other. We created this group called the Maryland Women in Energy Group. We meet for happy hours and try to support each other just locally. Solar Energy Industry Association, Abby Hopper has been a huge supporter of more women in the solar industry, and she started a book club with women, and she has a group called Solar Sisters, where we all have to support each other. And I think one of the things that is just warming my heart is seeing that people are finally realizing that women solving climate change problems is something that's going to help everyone.
So I got to throw in one little teaser for our startup episode coming up, and that is that a big study was done of energy startups in Silicon Valley, and It was done by the Haas Business School at Berkeley. And what they found is that startups that are diverse, both on racial and gender lines, raise more money, and they actually stay on their timelines, their Gantt charts. And that is far more true the more diverse your startup is. And so it's not just that it's something we like talk about. There's actually quantitative evidence that diversity is a clear benefit, whether it's job-wise or financial. And that's something that I think gets lost, certainly in the current attack that we're seeing on diversity. There are clear benefits of diversity and inclusion, not just some feel-good woke concept. Not that I'm against woke. I actually like the concept of woke. It means that you're aware of history. But we'll come back to that later.
Well, and don't forget that less than 5% of VC money goes to women-founded companies across the board, not just in our space, but everywhere. And so it's still a really, tough road to climb. And, not so long ago when I was trying to join an investment group somewhere close to here, I went through the final round of interviews, and one of the first questions they asked 7 men and I at a dinner said, "We know that you have little kids. How do we know that you're going to do a good job investing with us?" And my response was, "Do you ask that question of everyone that you interview?" They said, yes, we do. And after that interview, I was told I was being too aggressive. Needless to say, I didn't join that investment group. And when I invest on my own, just personally, I try to only invest in female-founded companies.
And just to kind of throw the numbers out at another level, I think if you look at current and recent past heads of state around the planet, the economies that have done the best have been women-led nations. So I think there's even data at a much higher level to say, at minimum, by discounting women, by discounting people of color, by discounting those who are different than the blue suit wearing people who went to just
tech bros.
Tech bros. I was trying to be a little broader, but yeah, tech bros will work. That, again, I think there is ample data, not just ample opinion, that diversity is a benefit. And you don't hear that, unfortunately, in D.C. today. It's a sad avoidance of the truth in favor of some weird retrospective view of America.
Of what America could have been back in the day.
So just kind of to wrap things up a little bit, we are going to try to solicit input and comments from the people who listen in terms of topics to go back to. We're certainly going to talk about things like women in energy, the future and the present of nuclear power, fission and fusion, the solar under different tax regimes, good and bad. We'll also be highlighting things like, where does energy and climate issues appear in the movies? Where do we see topics that energy is actually fundamental to it, but you don't see it? So we're going to try to explore that landscape. We'll be giving you the website. We'll be giving you the email addresses so you can track us down, hopefully in a easy way, because we really do want to make this interactive. And this is just an intro episode, but we really want to thank you all for tuning in and starting the journey with us.
All right. And if you want to learn more, you can go to energymatters.world, or you can reach out to us at info@energymatters.world.